All right, Jerry. Jerry, where are you from originally? Where'd you grow up?
I was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, uh, raised there for up until about the time I was 12, 10, 11, 12. And then I was a troubled kid with my mother, so she sent me to live with my dad in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan at an Air Force base in the early 70s. I was 12 years old, give or take.
How would you describe your childhood?
Abusive, lost, confused. My mother, uh, which let me say, I've come to understand why now. But my mother was very abusive, physical. She punched me, she beat me. It was a ritual at our house to, give me a belt, bend over the chair, and grab the legs. Those were the words you heard when my mother was angry. Get over that chair and grab those legs. And she tried to whip us on our asses. Sometimes the belt slung across our backs or down lower on our legs and those kind of things. But, I was very angry about that. Wanted to get away from it. So I ran away at a young age. But one of the things I learned, I just want to say about my mother, is, I love her. I loved her. She passed away, of course. But the thing I want to say about my mother, that's the way she was raised. So she didn't know any different. That's how you treat kids. This is how you raise kids. And it's my mother, what was handed to my mother, what was handed to my grandmother, was handed to me.
I think it's important for us to all understand that our parents or grandparents or whoever came from what they came from.
Yes.
And you can blame them, but you have to understand what they came from was 10 times worse.
I agree. But as a 12-year-old, a 15, 13, 14, 15-year-old, I didn't think that way. That came about later on as I got counseling and talked with people about why things are the way they are. Why are you the way you are? My mother, I can remember my mother at, maybe I can remember as far back as 5 or 6 years old, my mother beating me. And like I said, I love her. I cared about her greatly. Very sad when she passed. But, it's what she was taught. So that's what was handed to me.
And I'm guessing you didn't treat your kids that way.
Once I got counseling, once I went through a lot of phases of these things, and you gain an understanding of why these things happen, you start to realize that,
Just in case.
thank you, things are the way they are. And so once I realized, this is something that we can stop right here. And future generations won't have this in their realm, or whatever you want to call it. So once I realized that, I think that was the goal.
That's what you should all do.
That was what we wanted to do. And now I have grandchildren, and I have 2 daughters that with 2 children, and they're not being beat like I was. And so that in itself was an accomplishment, I believe.
That's because of your decision to not do that.
To not abuse my children. Yes. As a parent, I don't understand how anyone could abuse their child. Could hit, physically disrupt. My mother hit, abused in that fashion. She screamed. She called us bad names. Round ass was a common name for me when I sat on the couch. If I leaned over, she'd call me a round ass, just things like that. But once again, my mother learned what she learned. It was my responsibility to change, and I think we did.
Yeah.
Once I ran away from home. I ran away from her several times. My dad was in the military, in the Air Force. And they had a very bitter divorce. to a point that, there was never anything kind said about the other one in any shape, form, or fashion. She finally sent me to live with my father in the tundra of Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan.
It's cold up there.
And, I learned a new thing that I hadn't seen before. But part of my, as a youth, the trouble I got into in those days, it followed me to Michigan. And it wasn't long before I had issues with my father. I ran away from home several times. Each time I ran away from home, I stole a car or stole a motorcycle. Did something like that. And then I got put into a youth home from that point. From the state of Michigan, took me away from my dad and sent me downstate to Muskegon, to a wonderful place that I didn't know at the time, but a place called Harbor House. And the people, one of the things I found, I discovered about Michigan was at that time their youth force, the people that were trying to help the young wayward youths, really cared and tried everything they could to, to set me straight and set others straight. I got a job and I fucked it up by stealing from the job. And but they were great people in a sense. They knew that was going to happen. They knew that before I knew it, because they had already been through it. And while I was on a restriction at the house for the stealing, I still had to work. They wanted me to get to work. And a carnival came to Muskegon. And the guys in the house said, hey, they're hiring lumpers down there to set up the carnival, and then they'll be hiring guys to tear it down. So I went down, and a guy gave me we were a big group of people, and the guys, each guy from the rides or from the carnival barking places, the spinning wheels and things like that, shoot the water guns. They were all going, I need you to come help me set up my water gun thing. I need you to help me set up my tent. And I luckily got placed with a guy, and I helped him set up his 3 tents and set up his crazy ball tent, set up on the Midway in Muskegon. And when we got it all set up, I thought I was going back to the Harbor House and going to, then wait till the carnival was over and then come back and help him tear it down. And he had said, he patted me on the back. Man, I had never had anybody work like you. You want to work here for this week during the carnival with me. You can work in the booth, collect coins and stuff. He put me in a booth, and I raised at the Harbor House, said, okay, yeah, you can do that. And he put me in the booth, and it was a week I'll never forget. Once they did that, we tore the thing down, and we came to a moment when he explained to me, I'm going on to another thing. And we had the talk, I'm in a youth home, dude. I can't work for you, full time. And can't travel, I'm too young to travel. And he just said, when you get your troubles straightened out, you come find me and I'll put you to work. And I remember going back to the Harbor House thinking, that's what I'm going to do. Figure that out some way. I hung around for a few days, for a week, 10 days at the Harbor House, and all I could think about was that job. And finally, I packed a bag, and I jumped out the window and jumped out off the back fire escape, and I went to the next town that carnival had gone to in another part of Michigan, and showed up the next morning. And he was very nervous. He knew my situation. He knew I had run away. He said, I'll put you to work, but I'm not going, if someone comes for you, I'm not going to stand for you. So we ended up working that event and then working another one. The police did come looking for me, but in 1971 or 2, whenever this was, there weren't the technology that we have today. So they didn't even have a photograph of me. So they didn't know who they were looking for. Just some runaway kid from a Harbor House. And, they didn't find me. So I fell off the truck in Tennessee and got injured. And that was another thing. At 14, 15 years old, the carnival allowed me to drive their semi-truck. I just said I could do it. And I got in it, a little small. It was a small semi, flatbed. And I drove it from town to town. And it gave me gave me the experience to go to, where I've ended up. Started my experience to end up where I've ended up. And but I did fall off the ride. I got injured. I was in Louisiana, and I called my dad, who was worried. Who at that time, up until that time, I had not even thought about my parents. They didn't know where I was at. They didn't know what I was doing. They didn't know if I was alive or dead. I couldn't imagine that. I could not imagine that feeling today about any of my children. And so when I called my dad, he was quite angry, and he immediately sent the police. He didn't, I'd called him because he was in the military, and I thought, and there was a military base there in Alexander, Louisiana, and I thought somehow I can get to that base and the medical people will treat me, because I'm because I'm the son of an Air Force guy. And instead, my dad sent the police over, and they captured me or arrested me, and actually, they were wonderful people. They were nice guys. They weren't mean to me in any fashion. Matter of fact, they were kind of amazed that a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid had done what I had done, And then Michigan sent someone down to pick me up. Went back to Michigan, went back to Harbor House. Harbor House said, you can't stay here anymore. I had a friend who had been in trouble. The idea basically came about because a friend had been in trouble. And he joined the Marine Corps. And when he came home from boot camp in his dress blues, because he had done so well in boot camp, he got the dress blues. He didn't win them, he earned them. And when he had left to go to the Marine Corps, he had long hair and was a hippie-looking, bum-looking guy. And he came back in a Marine Corps uniform, standing straight and tall. And I was like, that's me, man. I want to be that. Because everyone was gathering around this young man, telling him, dude, you are, 6 months before, he was facing prison. Now he was this glorious Marine. And I thought, this is me. This is what I want to do. And so then I ended up in the Marine Corps. And, that was a wonderful learning time. That helped straighten some of my issues out with youthful trouble, but not all of them. And when I got out of the Marine Corps and went home, I immediately started hanging with a lot of the folks that I shouldn't have been hanging with, and I caught a robbery charge and a burglary charge and ended up going to prison. And, I think I probably thought my whole life would be that way for a while, but then I don't know what happened to me. I just was so upset with the situation, with being in an Arkansas prison, on an Arkansas prison farm. The prisons in Arkansas are farms, so they give you hose, and they chase you up and down the fields on horseback with shotguns, the guards have, yelling at you to cut the weeds. And because they don't use chemicals. They got convicts to cut the weeds down. And, I just didn't, I was so tired of being locked up. By the time I got out of prison, I had spent 7 years of my life behind bars in one way or another. Youth homes, juvenile halls, prison, jails, and I was sick of it. Just fucking sick of it. And I kind of vowed to myself, what I had to do, what someone told me was, you got to make a promise to yourself that you got to keep, not what, you can't make a promise to somebody else and keep it. You have to make a promise to yourself. And somehow or another I did. And I got out and changed my direction, changed my ideas on how to be, what to do. Served my time, did my parole, accomplished that. The parole man allowed me to play music because that was another thing throughout my life was I had played some music. And, life went on from there. Life kind of grew out of that.
And eventually you got into driving a tour bus.
Eventually I became a rock and roll tour bus driver. I started out as, because people in Michigan and in my past had been taking chances on me and encouraging me to do the right thing. But once I got out of prison, I had a job. I was playing in a bar band, 3 nights a week, and I was going to a music store and getting things on credit from a gentleman, from the guy that owned the store. Wonderful life mentor, Mike Penner. And one day he came to me and said, you owe me lots of money. And I just bought a rock and roll stage, a stage that performers perform on. And I need some roadies to help me set it up and tear it down. So we went and worked for for over a week for the big festival. It happened and went off. And when I got back, Mike shoved $1,000 in my hand in cash. And then I had to pay him a few bucks that I owed him, of course. And, he said, we're going to do this again. And he patted me on the back and told me, what a great job I had done. And that wasn't too much. I hadn't gotten too much of that in my life. And, we did that for a while. I worked on that staging for a while. And then a company said they needed a truck driver to haul rock and roll gear. I worked that angle for a while, and then I actually eventually I worked my way into driving buses. I drove entertainment trucks and trailers, pulling shows, but then I also, in between, started hauling freight and produce. Eventually purchased my own truck so I could keep the payments up. The shows were sporadic, and the tours were sporadic, so in between I would haul stuff from Arkansas to California, pick up produce and take it back to the Midwest. Run the South Texas routes with hauling produce. Because I own my own truck in those days, you could haul exempt freight, which was something that wasn't regulated. So I hustled exempt freight loads and from California to New York. And then in the meantime, I went and I worked the shows. Eventually, I got rid of that truck and got into a bus, and it's been a steady career.
Tell me about that. How did that all get going, and what bands did you drive for?
Well, I've driven for more than 100 different acts over the years, from Aerosmith, Dave Matthews Band, some memorable stuff like R. Kelly, Milli Vanilli, Van Halen was a awesome tour. Bruce Hornsby, the Grateful Dead, I drove them. Pearl Jam, Eddie Murphy tour, Kiss, Keith Urban, Courtney Love, just a lot of them. More, dozens, some I don't even remember. I was in Biloxi, Mississippi with a show, and I was working on my truck. I was polishing it, cleaning it, because I really like my gear to shine. And when a guy who owned buses came by and was like, God damn, man, if I can get a driver to take care of my bus the way you do this truck, and he's giving me his card and telling me to call him, and Mario was his name. And I was like, dude, I would never drive a bus, fuck you. And, but then a few months later, I ran into making a payment issue on my truck. And then once you fall a little bit, you're going to fall more. So the payment got, more behind and more behind, to a point that, and right at that period, I saw him again. And he gave me his card again, said basically the same thing, I want you to drive buses for me. I went home, I got rid of the truck, and I gave him a call. I found his card and called him, hey man, you serious about putting me to work? Hell yeah, let's go. And then a day or two later, I was on a plane flying to his shop in Pensacola, and where I got into a bus. I went out and picked up an old country band. My first band I hauled in a bus was a country band called Atlanta, which were their management were following the theme of Alabama. And so all their artwork, all their things it said Atlanta, but you could see Alabama all over it. But they were a good band, and I picked them up in Atlanta. I took them they were on their last leg. And I took them to Ohio, where they did a show in a mall, celebration of the birthday of the mall in Lima, Ohio, Mid-America Mall in Lima, Ohio. And I can remember the first day we drove up. They all liked me. They all patted me on the back. Great job driving. All this kind of stuff. You have to realize it's not easy to get into a vehicle with someone you don't know, and then on top of it, live your life. It's your house. Sleep while this guy's rolling you down. So they all patted me on the back in reference to that, and I picked them up at the hotel. We left the hotel to go to the gig, and these guys, they could sing, man. They could sing like you wouldn't believe. And I remember driving the bus over to the mall, and these guys were singing barbershop quartet stuff, warming up, because they knew as soon as they got the mall, they were going to walk on stage. So they were warming up, and they were singing, like Sweet Adeline, and 5, 6, 7 guys harmonizing that. It just, wow, it was amazing. And but that was the first band I hauled, and then they went to, they eventually broke apart. That was one of their last few shows. And then from there I went on and just, as an entertainment bus driver, unless you're fully employed by someone, which is very rare, only a couple in those days had their own bus. Someone like Loretta Lynn, Conway Twitty, those were the country acts. Rock and roll acts never owned their equipment. They rent it. You're a big star today with a hit song, and tomorrow you're nobody, and you still got a bus payment, so we rent the buses.
What kind of things do you see driving a rock band around the country?
In the 80s, I saw lots and lots of drug use, lots of alcohol use, lots of naked women. Depending on the band you get with, if you get a young band that's on its way up, then you're playing small bars. So you're going to places like the worst part of town, and with a lot of the bands where the rough bars are, where the good bars are, and you're staying in cheap hotels. So you're in a lot of areas where it's not necessarily the best place to be. Drug use, prostitutes, those kind of things. You see all those kind of things in the day. As you move up the ladder and you start getting on bigger and bigger tours, the money causes things to change, of course. And you stay in a Hilton, in a upper class Holiday Inn. You get in better hotels. The better band you get, the better hotels you're going to get out of the deal. Lots of strange human behavior. When people are in the limelight of the show, when they're at that moment that their heroes are busting out, and you could just about do anything to people. I mean, they're just in awe at their stare, at their joy on their face, their action of their bodies. There's just no place like being at a live music event and feeling it. And everyone has their heroes in the world, and to see one of your favorite musicians, it's always a happy time. And I think that's that's what draws me to this business. It's always happy out front. I mean, backstage we're working our asses off, but out front there's just this atmosphere of there's nothing else in the world that matters but the music and this moment, and that's a good feeling. There's hardly ever any violence or critical bad things going on.
Has the drug use continued, or is it tapered off in recent years?
In the 70s and the 80s, it was all about sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But now it's about business, business, business. And eventually the drugs are still there, but they're not the primary reason we're out there anymore, which seemed to be the reason we were out in the 80s. The drugs, There's, of course, as a driver, you can't do drugs. And the musicians, the roadies, it's just not like it was back in those days. It's more business these days, and if you can't do your business drunk and high forever, and eventually, it catches you, and someone notices, and they get somebody else that can handle their shit better than you.
Have you stayed away from drugs?
Pretty much. I mean, I had my I put needles in my arms back in the day. I took all kinds of pills and tried this acid in the 70s, into the early 80s. Honestly, my second wife, when I met my second wife, my life changed. We kind of give up. There was more to life than doing drugs. Getting fucked up every day, It was, especially once we had children. That's high in itself. That's just a high in itself, having children. And so there was no, my life changed. So it pretty much, that changed, the business changed. It all changed at the right time for me to take the next steps and to continue in a career that's taking me to the top of the ladder, so to speak.
I bet you got some interesting stories of your
And
travels.
I have seen, there were guys, in the 80s, it's sex, drugs, and rock. There were girls in the back of the bus that, honk guys' bobos. There were guys standing in line in the hallway of the bus to get their bobo honked. Those kind of things, the enormous amount. I had a band, a very popular band. I'm not going to say their name. Their biggest thing was they played poker with cocaine on the table in the bus as I drove them down the road. And, I'd hear them back there talking and yelling at each other. They'd take their laminates and push in some cocaine, for the bet. And every time there was a bet made, there was an argument because that ain't enough, blah, blah, blah. I put in more than that last time. And so, that in itself, it seemed as if people in the 80s, in the rock and roll time, did this sort of thing for, it's like, I got a license to do drugs, you can't stop me, And that was pretty much the theme. They were everywhere. Drugs that pick you up, though, mostly, barbiturates didn't work, too much. There weren't too many. The English bands seemed to have more issues with heroin than the American bands. Depeche Mode was a wonderful band that I got to drive. They came to America, and we started in the Warner Theater up in Washington, D.C. at the beginning of the tour, and they became so popular instantly. They grew so fast that at the end of that year, we did a show in Pasadena Rose Bowl to 100,000 people. So, they just exploded. I say that because that made me think of the English bands. I've driven quite a few English entertainers, European entertainers. I'll just say that, not necessarily English, but European. But drugs seem you have a license if you're in the entertainment business. It used to be it looks that way even in other forms of entertainment.
Yeah, drugs are.
Yeah, drugs are prevalent,
Yeah.
and people think they have a license to do them. To me, the story gets sad, though it gets old. It became a story of I want to be famous. I can't handle the fame. Now I have to do drugs, and now I've got problems.
It's got to be difficult for these musicians who go from being just struggling musicians to being gods almost.
Sure. And you have to understand the record companies used to push that sort of thing.
No, but
Let's get those guys in this room and force them to make a song. And if they say, well, we're tired, we'll give them drugs. We'll do this for them. We'll do that for them. We'll make sure that they get that song out.
No, but for an individual to go from being a regular Joe to being somebody that everyone is worshiping,
Yes.
is hard for that person. It's hard for that person to deal with. I would think.
Some days, I think it is harder for some than it is others. Yes.
And self-destruction kind of
Yes.
comes right around.
I
the
have
corner.
seen plenty make the trip without all the hassle. I have because of my, because I've done it long enough now. I've seen many make the trip with the hassle, and I've seen quite a few now that can do it without all that. It seemed like a cop out to me back. Now that you look back, it looked like a cop out now, but that was what was selling: sex, drugs, and rock and roll. The way women were practically, paraded is almost shameful these days to look back. If you go to a big rock show concert and the girls are on guys' shoulders taking their shirts off, I laugh. A joke nowadays is like if a girl did that, you'd be like, a girl from those days went to now to see, you'd be like, hey, put that back on. Hey, cover yourself up there. But no, they, so I don't know. Drugs are part of the business. Myself, I'm with children now. It had to change. It had to change.
And you're still driving today?
I am still driving today, and hoping. It has become a career, a full-fledged career, and a lot of people know me. I can get work if I just raise my hand.
You got a nice resume.
I do have a nice resume. I've seen a lot of entertainers and lots of shows. Seen entertainment done many different ways.
Who's one of the most impressive people you've driven?
I'm really honored to work with the Dave Matthews Band. They're incredible musicians. Some of the jazz musicians take music to heart. Man, you catch me with these questions. I could tell you just like that if you didn't ask me.
I hear that you were the driver on that notorious the bus in Chicago that dumped its human waste.
There was an incident of that happening, and I was in Chicago when that happened, but it was not me. I had nothing to do with it at all. Nothing. I was accused of it, actually.
It was your bus, right?
Because I'm driving a bus.
Yeah.
And I was accused of it, and I just say that I didn't do that.
Yeah, well, the person who did it got in trouble.
The person that did it eventually got found out, got caught, got brought before the court, and was sentenced to some punishment.
But your bus ended up dumping its human waste over the river on top of a boat that was going through under the bridge. The
incident occurred where a tour bus was on his way to the venue, on his way to pick up someone, and as he crossed a graded bridge, he flipped a switch that allowed his dump to dump. And unbeknown to him, he didn't look. He shouldn't have done it anyway. There was a architectural tour, Chicago architectural tour, going down the river. I guess it's the Chicago River. Mm-hmm. And it happened to dump on the folks at that time. And so, it was a nasty mess. I couldn't imagine being the victim. I couldn't imagine that. So this driver didn't use his head. He caused a lot of problems. And, it's a matter of stopping at a regular place and hooking your hose up and flipping that switch on your dash to letting it go in the proper place. And he didn't do that. So, but I had nothing to do with it, even though a lot of folks pointed their fingers at me.
So even huge bands are still traveling around the country via bus, right?
It's the cheapest way to travel. If you have a group of people, you can't fly them, you can't transfer them from the airports to the hotels to the gigs and back, hotel them and everything else. You can sleep 12 people in a tour bus, and they can do their show and get in their home and go to the next show the next day and get out and do their jobs. And there's not, it doesn't, it's expensive. It's still expensive, but it's nothing like what it would be having to fly and the logistics that you have to come up with in order to move. On any given tour, you're looking at 50 to 100 people, roadies, and band members and management and everything else. So
the world of a traveling musician,
yes,
just must It's just got to be an interesting.
If you can adapt to it, if you can adapt to the traveling, I honestly feel that part of the travel has helped me to stay young. It opens your mind to travel, opens your mind. You'd never seen, would have never seen downtown Los Angeles or Manhattan for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
I've been to every state in America and all the provinces of Canada. I've traveled on if you open a Rand McNally map, every blue road I've traveled on, and I've traveled on over half of the red roads. So I've seen parts of America that are unbelievable. And when I'm driving a tour bus, if I stop somewhere, it's an instant conversation starter. They're oohing and ahhing over what you have, and then you can get the information you need. Hey, what's going on here? What's this place all about?
Do you think what got these musicians into this career and to pursue it so relentlessly, just to become successful? What have you learned about that character, that personality type? Because sometimes they're doing it for reasons that are other than what it appears.
Yeah, I would think that there's a lot of musicians, entertainers. I want to say entertainer, not musician. That's a different thing. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of entertainers out there who have this, look at me, I'm famous, or want to be famous. Look at me. And then there are musicians and entertainers who actually are who they're supposed to be. And I believe that firmly. I mean, there are people that just dance around and shake their asses and follow the mainstream thing to the next thing. And then there are real musicians who really can break your heart, make your heart, or bring joy to your heart and your mind through their own well-being. And there are people I have met that I believe that there's no way else. You could have been anything else. This is you right here. To entertain the masses.
Does it make the tour easier when you're driving somebody who you believe in or you enjoy their music or their personality?
I think that's an interesting question. Maybe yes and no. It's work. It's work. It's a daily grind. You get up every day at 8 o'clock, or, and you go to work at 8. And you work 8 to 5. It's that grind. It's the same grind in the entertainment business. You're not working 8 to 5. You're working a different shift, but it's hard work, and it's hard work to be on the stage. It's hard work what goes on behind the stage, and it's hard work to get from stage to stage. So I lost myself on your question.
But the groupies? You see a lot of groupies, right?
Not so much anymore. We see lots of I think the groupie thing has changed, of course, depending on what your idea of a groupie is. There used to be, all kinds of groupies hanging out at hotels, at shows, following you down the road, offering to honk your bobo and whatever, They just want to feel part of that. And then there are people who just are there for the music, for the show, for the feeling of it, I guess. I've seen a lot of bad actors. I was on a tour in St. Louis when Bobby Brown and New Edition. Bobby Brown was with New Edition. We were in St. Louis, and I guess they had a strife with somebody there in St. Louis, and guys came by and shot up the bus with shotguns and guns. Shot up bullet holes in the side of the bus. I've seen things like that happen. I was on Smashing Pumpkins tour some years ago, and the keyboard player overdosed on heroin. So I've seen things like that. So it's just I've been to venues where guns were drawn, and people were scared to shitless. Bomb threats. There seems to be always a collection of people around, for sure. Be they fans, be them groupies, be them whatever. There's always someone following.
Do you ever regret choosing this line of work?
I do not now that I've done it. Maybe I had a time or two where I did. I know I did want to stay home with my family more, but it kept drawing me back to something. Kept drawing me back to this business. It's what's made me me. What else could I be? A truck salesman, or I mean, I don't know what else I could have done.
Jerry, what would you say is the most important lesson you've learned in your life?
Oh, wow. How to how to love. How to love. I didn't have that when I was younger. I didn't feel it when I was younger. I know, it takes us back to the beginning. I know my mother loved us, my brothers and sisters. But through the years, I've learned to love. I've learned what love is, what's most important with it, and the value of it. That's probably the lesson I've learned.
It's a great lesson. All right. Jerry Fitzpatrick, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thank you, friend.
Wish you lots of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.